Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the differences, and really come to a place where we each have to decide the difference between complaining and suffering, and how we handle it, and look at how some of the folks in the Bible handle it. So, looking at complaining and suffering today, we'll start right here in verse 1 of Numbers chapter 1, or chapter 11, verse 1. Now the people became like those who complain of adversity in the hearing of the Lord. And when the Lord heard it, His anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. The people therefore cried out to Moses. Let's take you back just a little bit before that, and you can read through this in Numbers and read this little story here. You know, a few years ago, and it's the same people, so a few years ago, they were praying and crying out to the Lord, and generations before them were praying and crying out to the Lord, save us from captivity, the slavery in Egypt. They were crying, hated it. They couldn't worship the way they wanted. They couldn't. I mean, they worked it. I mean, they wanted to be free, right? I mean, that's what they wanted, right? They were free. Amazingly, they were free. You know the story. They were brought about, came up to the Red Sea, and God saved them and spared them by the fire. The fire and everything kept the guys away, kept the Egyptian army away. So you know the whole story. Moses raised his arms, and you saw the movie, right? We saw the movie. And the sea parted, and they all walked through it like no big deal, and looking back, and then all those guys died coming after them. Amazing! What a sight that would have been, right? Then they get to Sinai. And when they get to Sinai, actually a cloud appears at the tabernacle that they erected, the temple. He appears there, and God appears in the form of a cloud during the day. Now, in the middle of the desert, first to shade them, I think, to give them comfort in the heat, but also a time for them to praise and worship Him, to pray unto Him. And then at night, now if you've ever been out west, which you have, because you said you're going to San Diego, but you go out west and at night, it gets cool at night. You got to put a sweater on. It's nice to have a campfire, even in the middle of July, out in the desert. It's just cool. Well, at night He provides them fire, and by night. Remember that story too. Cloud by day, fire by night. And when the cloud would move, they would know, okay, it's time to get up and journey along with the cloud. And then they come, finally, get their marching orders, and they come up out of Sinai, and they move on into the wilderness. The promise of the promised land, right? Now, these folks have seen, that's just a little bit of a history, these folks have seen all this happen in their lives. Amazing. And then it says right here, in verse 1, almost as if God was reminded of the complaining that He heard even when He was looking after them, when He was looking at it. He said, now the people became like those who complain of adversary in the hearing of the Lord. I thought that was interesting. I looked for commentaries and comments. What does that mean? I just kind of came up with my own idea, so go for it. Whatever you think. Maybe you can give me the answer later. But I came up with this idea. I said, you know, God, when He speaks to people throughout the Scripture, and even today, He usually comes with a message of direction and a message of hope. And when you read the Scriptures, through the Old Testament and the New, it's usually when God speaks, it's a message of direction and a hope. And a hope. And this almost like it reminded him here, he said, now the people became like those who complain of adversity in the hearing of the Lord. And He rose up with anger, and He started a fire throughout the camp and on the outskirts of the camp. And then the people cried. Now, it says in verse 2, the people therefore cried out to Moses. And Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fires died out. So verse 2, therefore, meaning something just happened, there was fire. They saw it. They were affected by it. they began to cry, "Oh, the fire, Lord Moses." And so Moses spoke to God, and God heard their cry, right? Now, those of you that have children, have you ever wanted to just light a fire in their room? I remember my mom said, "If you don't get that room cleaned up, I'm gonna light your house on fire. You know, I'm gonna light your room on fire. I'm gonna throw it all in the middle and light it on fire." Your mom, dad ever say that to you? You ever say that to your kids? I say it every day to my son. Get them Legos picked up. It's a nightly adventure. But when you think about it, when you get on your kids, you finally put your fist down, you jump on top of them, you get onto them, what's the first thing they do? "Oh, Lord, please!" And they start whining and crying, and they start pleading. And at that moment, they start pleading, whining, and crying, right? Not before, but when you actually lay down the hammer, they start pleading and whining and crying, don't they?
Absolutely.
That happens every time. I can make my boy cry like that. Not that I want to, but it's not that difficult most of the time. We're still working on that. Well, that's kind of what the Lord did. He said, "All right, I hear you. I hear you crying to me, and I'll die down the fire." You would think, wouldn't you, that after being brought out of Egypt, after having a cloud by day and a fire by night, after all of these things, after He answers the fire, they see fire from the Lord, actually affecting them in a negative way. You would think that these people would get a clue. But no, they didn't, because look what happens, obviously, here in verse 4. The rabble. Now, the rabble is the disorderly crowd, right? Now, some of you have a New International Version, and some of you have some other versions that says the foreigners. Well, you bring that all together, and it talks about the disorderly foreigners, the non-Israelite people. That's what this means. The rabble who were among them had greedy desires. And also the sons of Israel wept again and said, "Who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our appetite is gone. There is nothing at all to look at except this manna." You ever had a new car? You ever went out and bought a new car? Of course, we all got a new car, whether used or what, but I've never had a brand new car. Darn it. But I got a nice car now, I think. I've been blessed by it. My wife loves it. I got a truck. I don't like it, but I like it. Sort of. It was given to me by somebody really tall. And I appreciate it. But you know how that is when you get a new car, whether you use it or not? Oh, you like how the seats feel. You know, the air conditioner works just great. Oh, it's just much easier to work the radio now. Think about how smooth it drives down the road. Doesn't it look pretty when it's all washed and shiny? Man, if I got this old car, man, this thing's beautiful. You could be driving a Yugo, brand new, but this thing's better than what I had, isn't it? You've been there, right? We've all had that. Don't you hate it when somebody that doesn't even have a car starts telling you what they don't like about it? I don't like that car. That doesn't look great. I don't know. I don't like these seats. You look at that person and you go, "Man, you don't even have a car. What's your problem?" I've known people where I've gotten a new job and I'm excited, and been struggling, and they're like, "How much money? What did you get paid here?" "Oh, $40,000. "Oh, well, that's not that much." "You're living on welfare. What are you talking about? That's not that much." I've had literally